Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for our storytelling showcase. We're just going to give it a few minutes as we're just getting everything set up, and we'll get started at 10. Thank you. Hello, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Voices for Change storytelling showcase, where we're here to advocate and say yes to OPS. In other words, that's short for Overdose Prevention Sites. My name is Asis Lita. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Manager here at AIDS Foundation Chicago, and also an advocate with the Illinois Harm Reduction and Recovery Coalition. Today, our goal is to humanize the experiences of those that are impacted by overdose, substance use, and drug-related stigma to ignite positive change. OPS, outlined in the state's overdose action plan, has been implemented across the world for over 30 years, yet has yet to be implemented in the state of Illinois. I'll provide a brief overview of the Illinois Harm Reduction and Recovery Coalition and provide the key elements behind the push for an overdose prevention site pilot here in Chicago. Following that, our trainers, Archie and Michael, will introduce themselves and the 6 storytellers. And after they share their powerful narratives, I'll wrap up with some final remarks. A quick technical note, today's showcase will be recorded and shared later. And please stay muted and off camera during the showcase. If you have questions or comments, please don't hesitate to use the chat feature, and we'll address any questions or comments after the webinar. Ensure captions are on. If not, find the show captions option at the bottom of your Zoom window. And for those that want to hide them, you can click again for hide captions. If you can't find the captions icon, click the 3 dots more icon on the bottom of your screen, and you'll find them there. The Illinois Harm Reduction and Recovery Coalition is a diverse group advocating for community-centered and intersectional policy reforms. We aim to prevent overdose deaths, reduce substance use harms, improve treatment access, promote racial equity, and implement data-proven public health interventions. Our focus includes supporting the implementation of the Overdose Prevention Site pilot here in Chicago. For folks that aren't as familiar, OPS is a healthcare resource center providing services like medical supervision, sterile supplies, treatment, housing, and recovery support. At AIDS Foundation Chicago, we believe in harm reduction's merits. crucial in our response to the AIDS crisis and now vital as we combat the ongoing overdose crisis. Implementing safety nets like OPS allows us to reduce HIV transmissions, counteract stigma, and save lives in our communities. Now, I welcome Archie and Michael and our incredible storytellers.
Hi, everyone. I'm Archie Jamjan, and I'm one of the co-coaches, I guess, for the storytelling event today. I want to thank AFC for letting me involved in this project, and I want to thank all the tellers for opening up over the past few weeks with their stories. Our first storyteller is Daniel Castrina Jr. Daniel enlisted in the U.S. Army right after 9/11 in January of 2002. He served honorably for 11 and a half years. Daniel graduated from Daly College in the Advanced Sustainable Urban Agriculture Certification Program and is currently pursuing a culinary arts degree through Kendall College of Chicago. He is also going on his 5th season as an urban farmer. Please welcome Daniel.
I remember waking up on my parents' couch one fall morning, slowly opening up one bloodshot eye and seeing a plane hit a skyscraper on the TV. I thought I was watching a movie until I noticed the Fox News logo at the bottom of the screen. This was real. We were going to war with somebody. I was so hungover, but I had an appointment to meet my Army recruiter for the 3rd time later that day. I was determined to join up. I chickened out once when I was 18, but this time it was different. The recruiter told me to come back because that day was not a good day to worry about me getting into the Army. I did come back, and on 15 January 2002, I arrived in Fort Knox, Kentucky, Fortan School, and was greeted by a bunch of screaming drill sergeants. Besides my father, those drill sergeants are the men who did the most to make me into the man I am today. In late March 2003, I got my cherry popped. All I remember hearing over the net was lock and load, do not fire until fired upon. My Humvee took shrapnel later that year from a small bomb, and I received a functioning concussion. I felt the shockwave and saw black smoke everywhere. That was just the beginning. I deployed to Iraq 3 times in all. We survived many attacks, and a lot of soldiers paid the ultimate sacrifice, either on the battlefield or in a losing battle with their mind, due to the post-traumatic stress that occurs after serving in a fire zone. I served for 11 and a half years honorably as a TAC commander, including 35 months deployed in Iraq. On 24 June 2013, I came back home to Chicago for good, having finally separated from the Army. I was going through a divorce at the time and had not seen or held my kids in a while. I was a full-blown functioning alcoholic and had no job coming home. I was thankful to have my family, but even when I was with them, I felt alone. I couldn't tell them about everything I'd been through and was struggling with. So I started smoking weed again about a month after I got out. I was scared of it because I knew it was more potent than the 90s stuff I was used to. And I'd stopped messing with drugs years ago once I joined the Army. I drank while enlisted, but I didn't see it as a problem until it was too late in my career. And I was always sober as a judge on deployments. Now, cocaine followed the weed. I was going nowhere. I went to county jail for a little bit, and I was even extradited to Kansas at one point. I first got sober the day after the 2019 Super Bowl. Tom Brady was a big motivation for me because I was going on 40 just like him, and I knew I needed to make a change. I've been up and down ever since. Thank God, one day I typed Chicago veteran organizations near me into Google, which led me to a nearby American Legion building. I was finally around people I felt comfortable with. Eventually, I was introduced to a class on urban rooftop farming at the farm on Ogden in the North Lawndale neighborhood of Chicago. I was told about the Windy City Harvest program from one of my mentors in farming, and it was exactly what I needed. I started farming in April of 2019 and never looked back. I found a job that I love again. I'm serving again by helping people eat fresh produce and educating them on it. These underdeveloped communities really need help. People talk about Chirac. I've served in the real Iraq, and it's true. I sometimes feel like I'm in a third world country again when I travel through some parts of the south and west sides of Chicago. There are so many liquor stores and fried food places on every block, but I know many people whose lives were turned around by getting into urban farming to help their communities. And being around plants is definitely therapeutic for me. Working in rooftop and urban farming, I've had jobs where I get to work around 05:30 in the morning and see people strung out on drugs, lying on benches or on the ground. And despite the fact there was a daycare and a congressman's office right nearby. In West Garfield Park, this was normal. A woman came up to me one morning and asked me for $1 there. I gave her two and wrote down a resource that I Googled real quick so she can get help, but I never saw her again. I would see other women proposition men for sex, many of whom were clearly struggling with addiction. They really needed help. It won't happen overnight. This is not a movie. My own journey has taught me that I went 2.5 years sober and then relapsed, got sober again, relapsed again. Now I've been sober from alcohol since January 13th of this year. No cigs since July, and I can't even remember what date I stopped taking pills from the VA. At one of the farms where I work on Madison in California, a lot of people come up to me and say how beautiful the farm looks and ask if they could help out. I'm all smiles when I hear that because it reminds me that people want these environments to change and to change themselves, and they're willing to put in the work. People like me will continue to share experience and knowledge so that the next generation won't continue to suffer. But these communities need more support, and the work I do is just one piece of that puzzle. I hope you'll help us put one more piece what's most needed into these overdose prevention centers. I didn't serve to come, back home so I could see people struggle on drugs. These, communities are really needing these overdose prevention centers because they've really impacted a lot of people, especially people I know, like veterans have died by suicide or like close to me, like my ex-wife, she got overdosed on drugs. So I thank you for your time, ladies and gentlemen.
All right. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for that story. Thanks for your service. Good morning, everybody. My name is Michael Fisher. I'm along with Archie co-facilitating the storytelling showcase today. And I am here to introduce Erica Ernst. Erica is a social worker, paramedic, drug counselor, and passionate harm reductionist. She's the clinical director at Renaissance Services and the board president of the Chicago Recovery Alliance. She's been involved in advocacy for affordable housing, mental health, and people who use drugs for 30 years. She speaks nationally on these topics, as well as on trauma-informed care and street medicine. Please welcome Erica.
It's late August of this year, a sweltering Tuesday evening. My boss calls. Karen hasn't arrived for her 5 p.m. shift and isn't picking up her phone. Karen and I have been friends and colleagues for over 15 years. I live 10 minutes away from her apartment. I feel a surge of adrenaline, get in my car and drive. Sweat is pouring down my shirt despite the air conditioner blasting as I try to sound calm, making panic calls to Karen's daughter and anyone who might have keys or any other means of getting into Karen's apartment. I hope I'm overreacting, but I'm fearful that I'm not. Karen has been working at the Needle Exchange where we first met for over 25 years. Karen with her intense, bright blue eyes. She is always advocating for and allying with our participants. Self-deprecating, youth program initiating, Cheeto and Springsteen loving Karen. Checking me when I talk over her, stalwart friend and doting mom. Karen knows the dangers of using opioids alone. She's been doing it for about 20 years, but her partner, Dan, died of an overdose 5 years ago this week, and I can only imagine how quiet her apartment must feel for her. I pull up to the apartment an eternity later, and I'm grateful that the neighbor lets me in the main door. I run up the stairs, and Karen's apartment door is unlocked. The smell of cigarettes and incense hits me, and Karen's dog Luna greets me at the door, looking sullen with her head bowed. I'm calling Karen's name, desperately searching rooms. I find her curled up in a ball on the floor beside her bed. I can't move her. I can't find a pulse. I'm fumbling to call 911, trying to convey to the dispatcher that yes, I have Narcan, and yes, I know CPR, but I've been through this so many times, and I know it's too late for that. She's gone. She had only been missing for an hour. Then there's the blue bodies over the next few hours, asking random questions and staring at me. Paramedics, then police, detectives, and the coroner. At some point, a detective points to an elaborate memorial box sitting on Karen's mantle and asks, "What's that?" "That is naloxone," I say. "We use it to save each other. I carry it, and you should too." That box is full of Dan's gift for all of us. Before we lost him to overdose 5 years ago, Dan was among the founders of the needle exchange where he and Karen met, fell in love, had a beautiful relationship that included the addition of their daughter Soph and dog Luna. Dan worked tirelessly to ensure Narcan made it into the hands of everyone who needed it, especially drug users. He started his work in the 1990s when no one believed that drug users could or would save each other. That this was a job best left to medics and doctors. He proved the experts wrong. Dan died alone while the rest of his family slept. Karen died alone 5 years later, before starting her shift at the needle exchange. People die alone every day because of the rampant stigma against people who use drugs. Finding harm reduction saved my life. In this pragmatic approach, I found meaning and community. My family of origin is largely filled with substance use, depression, and suicide, but my chosen family is full of passion, hope, and love. When we gather, the remaining members of that chosen family, always remember those we have lost to overdose. The long list of names is deafening. I love my chosen family, but it's shrinking too fast. Karen and Dan should be alive today. They would be if they didn't feel an intense shame that drove them to use alone. If overdose prevention sites had been a reality in Karen and Dan's community, they'd still be here as thriving caregivers, leaders, parents, and my friends. Say yes to OPS. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. You're such a great example of how sometimes your own trauma just leads you to helping other people, and that really inspires me. Our next storyteller is Jeremiah Sweat. He is a junior at Bloom High School. He's 17 years old and works as an assisted living home for the elderly. He recently spoke about his experiences at a Black Balloon Day Assembly, which is a day to remember and celebrate the lives lost to overdose. Please welcome Jeremiah.
When I was in first grade, I went about my life like any other kid in my grade. I went to school, played at the park, and came home to my parents arguing about silly things. My father would accuse my mother of being unfaithful, which I thought was silly, because in my first grade mind, I knew parents always loved each other, no matter what. This specific day, I came home around 6 p.m. because I'd been playing at the park with my friends after school. My mom was speaking funny, had a nasty tone in her voice, and a sour, sweet smell on her breath. The pungent smell I now know was alcohol. I didn't notice that my father and mother were arguing about something until I heard the words, "Go back to that other guy." My oldest sister was sitting on the opposite side of the room, watching all this unfold. Me being curious, I sat down on the couch with her. My father was obviously irritated about the situation. He went to their bedroom and locked the door. For some reason, my mother then began verbally attacking my sister. My sister pulled her phone out and started recording. Because my sister was my role model at the time, I suddenly felt the need to record too. I remember my mom grabbing a hammer and trying to break the door down so she could get to my father. Watching my mother go crazy on the bedroom door was one of the scariest things I'd ever seen. Eventually, she gave up and came back to the living room, where me and my sister were sitting, and threw the hammer across the room. It went straight through a closet door as if it was made out of paper. And it was at that moment I felt fear for my own safety. My father didn't come out of the bedroom until he heard my mom leaving the house. I watched from our front door as my mom started her car and sped down the road. I didn't see her again that night. Many days later, my father took me to a really big building. I thought it was at the White House. It was actually a county courthouse, but my young mind didn't comprehend that. While looking around, being a curious kid, I peeked through a window and saw my mother. She didn't wave at me, but she gave me a subtle nod. I was confused why. It looked like she was holding her hands behind her back and she was wearing a strange outfit, an orange jumpsuit that she wasn't wearing when she left. A minute later, a really big man asked me to give him my phone and show him the video I made the night my mom left. I wanted to follow directions, but I was also scared to give my phone up because I didn't want my mom to get in trouble. She was my mother after all. But I let the man take my phone anyway. While my mother was still staying at the big white building, my father found out she was in fact being unfaithful. I had no idea at the time what that meant, but it enraged my father. I could feel the change in the way my father felt about my mother. The arguing got worse when my mother returned home. This dragged on for a few years. When I was in fourth grade, my father brought me to a little house, or what felt like a house. We walked in and I saw my mother standing up, speaking to a room full of people. She was talking about her drinking issue. Then I saw other people stand up and share their own stories about their drinking issues. We were in an AA meeting. Being there was scary, but at the same time, it was interesting because I got to hear about what other people went through and how their experiences related to my own life. Maybe what I'd been through hadn't been normal after all. I noticed that after these meetings, my mother and father stopped arguing, and my mother became nicer. She stopped sounding funny, and you'd be able to smell the mint on her breath, replacing that pungent, sweet smell. Life felt calm. I felt the love in my household. For 5 years, my life was amazing. My normal, which had consisted of constant arguing and hatred, was gone, replaced with something so much better. 7th grade came so fast. Walking into my house from school, the school bus one day, I heard the yelling. Waves of that old fear and horrible memories filled my brain. I saw empty beer bottles and a packed bag at the door. My mother was pushing my father as he was trying to walk out of the house. He moved her out of the way, came up to me and said, "You know I love you, right? You'll see me." And then he just left. I didn't understand what had happened or why my father had just left. Suddenly, my mother took my phone and began messaging my father. She kept telling me, "My phone is dead. I need to use yours." So I let her. I didn't get my phone back that night. I woke up the next morning with my father in the house. I got my phone back, but my amazing life went back to my old normal, the bad one. My dad started constantly leaving the house, and each time he did, my mom would take my phone and he'd be back in a day or two. This happened almost every week. Eventually, I figured out why my mother was pretending to be me on my phone, to guilt my father into coming back. But even once I knew, she'd guilt me into letting her continue the ruse, telling me, "If you love your father, you'll let me get him back." This cycle was repeated until the end of 8th grade, when the messages finally stopped working. My father stopped coming back. He was gone. I was growing up and growing an unhappy feeling towards my mother. She filled me with guilt and sadness, making me feel like it was my fault my father left. But by then I was a teenager. I formed my own opinions. I knew my mother was drunk, and I knew it wasn't my fault that she couldn't put the bottle down. I would have to find my own way to school, fix myself meals, and just generally care for myself. After a while, my mother met a new guy. This guy would take her to the AA meetings she had been to when I was in the 4th grade. She was finally fixing herself, but after so long, there was no fixing me. I look back at all the hurt my mother put me through, and I live with the trauma every day, wondering if she'll relapse or force this new guy to leave. I try to forgive my mother for everything that happened because at the end of the day, there was no one there for her either. But I can never forgive the person who put me through hell. I sometimes wonder what my life would have been like if my mother didn't drink or had received the kind of support that anyone in this country should have access to. How my normal could have been like the other normal of the kids, coming home and doing homework with the help of my mom, family movie nights on the weekends. Instead, I'm left trying to unlearn the abuse I went through without any support of my own to ensure I don't become like her and continue the intergenerational trauma. I second guess everything I do because everything I did as a kid wasn't good enough. I bottled up my feelings because they weren't validated by her when I was a kid. My mother is now better than she was so many years ago. But as a man, I still pity her. As a son, I resent the person she was. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremiah. Only in high school, can you believe it? And that story's such a great example of the way that these issues kind of reverberate down the generations. So that was great to hear. Thank you. Our next storyteller is Aisha Betancourt Esquivel. Aisha is a founder of the Brianna Land Project, a nonprofit organization that focuses on mental health and substance use awareness. She's the program manager for City Helps, which aims to reduce juvenile delinquency in Chicago Heights, and is also the outreach manager for the Illinois Helpline. However, she says her favorite job is mother. Please welcome Aisha.
When I became pregnant at 15, I was excited, thinking I would be less lonely. When they announced she was a girl, even better. I gave her my middle name. My oldest memories of Brianna and me are of us jamming out to Miss Lauryn Hill and Shania Twain in my little Ford Escort with the windows down. She was about 3 or 4 then. She was my little best friend. She took on my love of Chuck Taylor's 90s hip hop, Post-Secret books, and eventually the love of tattoos. She was a great hugger and a people person. She was creative and smart, a strong leader. She was hilarious and had a perfect smile. However, by the time she was 17, Bree decided she wanted to party with her friends. I couldn't get down like that. As for me in my house, you know the rest. I had been a chaotic drinker until we started going to church. As I was putting my bad habits down, Bree was picking them up. She spent her senior year house hopping, smoking weed, and misusing alcohol. Despite this, she was able to maintain her schoolwork and was accepted into multiple universities. She spoke at graduation as senior class president. Bree continued drinking and began misusing Adderall while attending Illinois State University. She lost her scholarship and returned home, where the house hopping and substance use continued. A doctor prescribed her Xanax for her sleeplessness and anxiety, and months later, another doctor introduced her to painkillers to alleviate her chronic pancreatitis. Her evolution to addict included stealing, lying, lashing out verbally and physically, and betraying family and friends. She made very poor decisions and established toxic relationships with people and pills. In 2016, Bree and I became pregnant around the same time. She told me she didn't think she should keep it. I told her I would support whatever she decided, but behind the scenes, I prayed she would change her mind. On the day of her procedure, she came home to me so that I could comfort her. I was cooking her a favorite meal when she hugged me from behind and said, "I decided to keep it." I invited Bree to help me with my son's delivery in August that year. And 5 months later, to the very day, Brianna delivered her baby boy. He had a low birth weight and a cry that was so high-pitched that we instantly added dinosaur to his given name. Danny the dinosaur. I now know that was the cry of a baby affected by substance misuse. But in those early days, I saw my daughter in love with her son. She cuddled him and sang our favorite Al Green songs to him. She loved that baby hard. However, addiction was stronger. After Bree and her son's dad broke up, she spiraled rather quickly. I knew Xanax was her drug of choice, but because it was prescribed, I did not think we were in dangerous territory. Even after multiple hospitalizations for suicidal ideation and an attempt after seizures, arrests, and multiple car accidents, I didn't get it. Because she had been such a strong-willed girl, I believe this to be a behavioral issue, something she could just stop doing, not an illness. In May of 2018, She was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. 1 year later, on May 15th, 2019, I was proven wrong for the last time. This wasn't a simple behavioral issue. Bree had been estranged from most of her family and friends and hadn't seen her son in weeks. My daughter, Brianna, lost her battle with the disease of addiction. When I was told the news in that hospital compassion room, I yelled at God, and then I turned to my mom. I cried out to her, "Mommy, Mommy," as if she could fix it, because moms are supposed to fix things. As Bree's mom, I need connection with her. She must feel the same way because she has been giving me signs since the day she died. As a family of women, we would often goof around and punch each other in the boob. In my last moments with Bree's body in the casket, I told her I didn't know how to say goodbye to her. So instead, I said, "See you later," and I punched her in the boob. The next morning, while getting into the shower, I noticed a bruise over Brianna's name, the tattoo I've had nearly all her life, right above my boob. She was and still is my baby and best friend. She lives on through her little boy. He and my son are besties and brothers. I'm grateful for all the gifts she left us, but especially Danny the dinosaur. That dinosaur is a Latino male who has drug abuse and mental health issues deep in his blood. Losing his mommy made our family pay attention and admit the secrets of heredity that in part led to Bree's death. Her son faces the adversity of having only one living parent and is developing noticeably slower than his uncle brother. He lives in the same community his mom suffered in, where crime is high and resources are scarce. So many of us failed Bree. Parents, family, friends, doctors, but most of all, her community. An overdose prevention site could have saved my daughter's life. They would have been able to talk with her, and if she chose to use drugs, she would have had the opportunity to test her drugs for fentanyl. Had her breathing stopped, they would have saved her. No one's child should have to die unsupported and alone. Someday, an overdose prevention site might save someone you love. You may think it could never happen in your family, but all I can tell you is I used to think that too. Thank you.
I really want to thank Aisha for all the work she did on that story, because she's actually used to telling that story in 1 hour. So she got it down to 5 minutes. And I don't know about you, but the bruise just really, really haunts me. So great job with that. Now, someone she's familiar with, we have Yvette Betancourt. Yvette is a retired police department employee, a religious educator for the past 27 years, and a big animal lover. She volunteers at the Brianna Land Project, a nonprofit that focuses on mental health and substance abuse issues, which is named after her granddaughter. So there's a connection here if you've been listening. In her scarce spare time, she calls bingo at a local retirement home and listens to true crime podcasts. Please welcome Yvette.
May 15, 2019, Wednesday morning. I have a nice black skirt on with a white shirt that has small kitty faces on it. I'm going to apply for a part-time position at lunch. I've been at work about half an hour at the local police department. All the 911 calls coming over our radio. Suddenly I hear a name I recognize, Brianna Betancourt, my granddaughter. I'm thinking this is way too early for her to be up. She must have been out driving around, looking for a job closer to home. Then the call is toned out. and we can't hear any more of what's happening. Not a good sign. This only happens for serious accidents. The chief's secretary, Elisa, comes into our office. She says the chief wants to see me. Never a good thing when you're called into his office. The chief tells me Brianna is being transported to the hospital. I don't remember if he ever alluded to an overdose, but I remember he asked me, can I drive? I'm like, of course I can drive. He tells Elisa to drive me there anyway. It's a 10-minute drive, but it feels like an eternity. We arrive at the ER. This is where it gets blurred. I feel like an outsider looking at a black and white film reel. Some slides are blank negatives. The scene's missing. I don't understand what is going on. The hallway is filling up with Brianna's dad's relatives. A doctor in scrubs arrives with his team and tries to get my daughter Aisha into the compassion room. You know what that is, right? Not a good room. The doctor kneels in front of my daughter, who is seated on the couch. I'm standing in front of the sink where there's a big mirror. I look at myself. I see my daughter's reflection. We are about 7 feet apart in that room, but miles apart mentally. The words coming out of the doctor's mouth sound like an echo, so distant. He says something to the effect that they tried everything, but Brianna didn't make it. Elisa's hugging my daughter. I have cement legs. I'm throwing out. I hear my daughter's shrieks of pain, crying, asking why, calling for me, but I can't move towards her. I look at the mirror again. It is not supposed to happen to me. I'm a good Catholic, church every week, attend a Catholic school. Our family's law abiding. We've never dealt with illegal activities. But over time, Brianna became a frequent flyer. Some of the reports I entered and filed at work had her name on them. Before she became a frequent flyer, my coworkers and I would roll our eyes over these reports. All those frequent flyers doing stupid things, stealing, being off their meds, acting fools. Such a waste of city resources. Somebody else's problem. I'd seen and read it all. Brianna had been picked up by the cops weeks before for stealing some expensive shampoos and a piece of steak, which she planned to sell for drugs. I was calling to the chief's office then too. He said she was throwing my name around downstairs at the jail. I said, no, you keep her there. But eventually they let her go because her crime didn't amount to enough money to prosecute. One time I was calling to the detective's office. A couple was going to assign assault complaints against Brianna. She bit the man, slapped the woman. Of course, no one was admitting that the complainant did drugs with her too. The detective wanted me to talk to her. I said, no, you talk to her. She won't listen to me. She was so little, weighed next to nothing. You couldn't believe she was this ferocious creature in that compact body. But now I'm in this compassion room. This is not real. I need to compose myself. I want to see her body, but first I will post her death on Facebook. Just the shocking facts. Don't contact me. Don't ask any questions. This was not supposed to end like this. Bree was too smart. She worked. She was a good employee. She was a good mother. I told the hospital staff I was ready to see her. The women walking me to Brianna's room are so concerned for me. I tell them I'm okay, but I'm loudly cursing God, betrayer. After all I've done in your name, my daughter's pastor is there. I don't care. God has disappointed me. Now I'm in Brianna's room. I'm numb, but I go to her body covered by a sheet. I whisper into her ear, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She's beautiful laying there. Her long dark hair is spread around her head. Not a tear. This isn't real. Now more relatives are coming into the room. It's so full. I'm sad. I'm angry. I'm asking, where was she when this happened? Her friend's house? She had no permanent address at that time. She had been couch surfing. Why didn't he call the ambulance sooner? The coroner's on his way to remove her body. This chapter is over. I will never be the same again. The guilt to this day still commands a presence. We all failed her. We cared, but not enough to ask for help or resources like Narcan, rehab, Narcotics Anonymous, or an OPS. I thought once she'd hit rock bottom, things would change. But prayer won't solve everything. Brianna should not have died, not like that, in the house of a friend who'd fallen asleep. I want to blame everyone, including myself, for asking Bree to leave my house 5 months earlier. But the support and help Brianna needed was bigger than any of us individually could give her. I take my grief days at work and return the following week. I worry that my coworkers will see me differently now, the grandmother of a frequent flyer who didn't make it. But everyone is so nice. My boss tells me if I need to step outside to get air, I should do what I need to do. My coworkers don't talk about it, but give me good hugs. I think of the judgments, the comments we used to make about those frequent flyers, how dark humor helped us deal with what we heard coming in over the radio. I'm not laughing anymore. I go to work and I type out those frequent flyer reports, but my granddaughter's name is no longer on them. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvette. Oh, it's been such a privilege for me and for Archie to work with all the storytellers. And we have one more storyteller for you today, which is Ernest Mosby. Ernest was born in Chicago. He's a 43-year-old motivational speaker, book writer, life coach, urban community activist for substance abuse and mental illness, and a business owner. Please welcome Ernest.
Thank you, everyone. Early in my childhood, growing up on the west side of Chicago, I decided that I wanted to be the bad guy. Influenced by gangster rap, movies, I was attracted to the gang culture and the drug trade. I was ready to begin my life as the next Al Capone or the next Scarface. Doing drugs and partying was a way of life for me and my peers. We were told that our lifestyle would lead us either to an early grave or prison cell. It was prison for me. I'll never forget the day the police pulled me out of the car and threw me on the ground, all of them yelling, "Stop resisting. Put your hands behind your back." That was the last day of freedom for me for the next 15 years. I'd been in and out of prison before, but this time it was different. I had a lot of time to reflect on my life and what I wanted to do with it. As I sat there thinking, I realized that I hadn't accomplished much in my life. Because here's the thing about the bad guys. They never have no skills, no education, and no real work history. All I knew was the streets and a life of crime. I didn't know what I wanted to do with myself. I thought maybe I'd go back to school, seeing that it was an escape from the cell I was confined to. I didn't like most of the few classes offered until one day they started a drug education class. This was a subject I knew all too well, or at least I thought I did, until I began learning about the consequences, causes, and effects of drug use. I learned of psychological, biological, and sociological effects as well. I became addicted in a different way to the study of the effects of drugs. The prison, poor education system, and old library books became my new lifelines. Looking back at the person I was and at the person I am today, I can see how much I've changed. I've become a person of substance, pride, and purpose. When I was young, I didn't like school much, but in prison, I began to like to learn it at my own pace. I studied psychology, sociology, behavior modification, and even business. My educational journey instilled in me a new hope. I couldn't wait to get out and put my knowledge and dreams to the test. Luckily, I got a great starter job after prison, working as a security guard. I remember standing there in the department store, thinking about how I used to be the guy that was steal out of these places. Now I'm being trusted to secure them. But the pay wasn't. The pay wasn't enough to live on. I'd gone from making $1,000 in 5 minutes to $700 every 2 weeks. And it was not sustainable. I decided to go back to school, finish my education, and become a drug counselor. While in school, I learned about a new program they offered training as a peer support specialist. So I changed plans and got a job as a recovery specialist instead. Now I work on a 2-person team with a paramedic from the Chicago Fire Department. We respond to opioid overdoses that occur in our coverage area, helping people who have overdosed within the last 72 hours but survive. It's my job to engage them, offer support and resources, and use my lived experience to help them onto a path of wellness and recovery. On day 10 of the job, I was sitting in the van with my partner. We call it the caravan. It's built like an ambulance, but it's blue instead of red. We had just pulled over near a park to fill out some paperwork when I looked up and saw 2 men holding another man who looked unconscious. Immediately grabbed a box of Narcan, informed my partner of the situation, and ran to see what I could do to help. As I was running towards the scene, I noticed that there was also a police officer standing nearby. This almost brought me to a halt. I'm never comfortable around police. I began asking the men questions about what was wrong with the unconscious man, if they knew his name and his drug history. The men claimed this guy didn't do drugs and that he didn't know what was wrong with him. I was still pretty nervous about the police officer standing there, and I couldn't make eye contact with him. Soon my partner arrived and began CPR. As I stood there frozen with a box of Narcan in my hand after a few rounds of CPR, I noticed that the fire department had arrived. A woman from the fire department walked right up and immediately stuck the man in the arm with a long needle. He regained consciousness in an instant, eyes wide open and responsive. I've been to school and learned about the effects of these drugs, but nothing compares to seeing them in action. Narcan is one of the most powerful weapons we have in the fight against overdoses. And that day left no doubt. I walked away from that situation with mixed emotions. I was relieved that the man was okay, but upset that someone from the fire department stole my moment. I hesitated because I was so concerned about the police officer standing there, but then I remembered. These days, I don't have anything to fear from the police. I'm one of the good guys, and that's my story.
I'm just incredibly humbled that we've had the opportunity to share this journey. It's been weeks in the making. And I think hearing the stories that we've heard, it's a reminder that the perspectives are many. The folks that are impacted are numerous, and we often don't really understand to what extent the overdose crisis is really hitting us all. So I want to thank every single storyteller in the room. The stories are really going to last and stay with me for a lifetime. And before we wrap up, I want to express gratitude to everyone here with us today. A heartfelt thank you to our incredible storytellers, Daniel, Erica, Jeremiah, Aisha, Yvette, and Ernest. Your stories have truly moved us. Let's also extend our appreciation to Archie and Michael, not only for being fabulous storytellers themselves, but also for their role as trainers and facilitators. A huge shout out to the force of advocates driving the Illinois Harm Reduction and Recovery Coalition. Your dedication is inspiring. I must acknowledge also my AFC colleagues, Nadine Israel, Dominic Chu, and Ben Roro, for their invaluable support in organizing this training series and assisting with the tech today. And of course, a special mention to the AFC Communications and Development team, Sarah, Patty, and Michael for their unwavering contributions. As we close, I urge each of you to carry these stories with you. Behind the stigma surrounding our communities affected by substance use, there's real human stories. When we recognize that we lose 10 people every single day to preventable overdose, it hits home. It's the loss of a daughter, a parent, a friend. A collective future is taken from all of us. Stay engaged with us by following socials and considering joining our mobile action network, our mobile action center. We'll attach the link in the chat. Stay updated on the Illinois Harm Reduction and Recovery Coalition's progress. The website for the coalition is also going to be added into the chat. And find ways to support their initiatives on social media. Thank you all for spending this morning with us at the Storytelling Showcase. Enjoy your weekends, and remember, say yes to OPS. Thank you.